notion I to apply the same inquiry, the same introspection that discerns what your identity is. Then what makes for freedom will no longer be a mystery. It'll be self-evident.
It's not so much that I have might not be the right word, an aversion to looking at it, as much as it seems, and as you know, this isn't typically my approach, but it seems complex when I think about sort of dismantling things bit by bit like that.
The complexity lies in the adherence to the present ignorant conception. Once there is conviction in the absolute, be that God or considered as God or the self, the complexity is no longer overwhelming, and actually the path is simple and clear and direct. If only the personal notion is the perspective, well, how will the personal ego get rid of itself? How will a collection of tendencies be able to engage in examination of those tendencies and be rid of them? It'd be a far-fetched idea. But if there's conviction that an absolute reality does exist, God, the Supreme Self, then there's adherence to that. There is merger with that. That is the goal, and that is also within. That leads one on, that illumines the path. That gives the necessary direction. And the motivation is natural. The personal then tendencies are not then all entangling. And right from the start of such inquiry, one's identity is lifted beyond that domain. After all, that which can actually discern a tendency as a tendency and destroy the misidentification constituting it cannot be a tendency itself. Cannot be that definition. So already there is light.
I'm wondering about love. I think I've mistook happiness with the ability to open the heart completely. And I still believe that to be realized is to be completely open-hearted. And yet that my thoughts get entangled with whether I love or whether I am loved. And it just gets very confusing for me.
Because you reduce love to the scope of the ego. When you can discern with, do I love and am I loved? Let's look at the last part of that first. Am I loved? What is the definition of I in that statement? Is it the infinite reality of limitless being, the indivisibility of which is known as love? Or is it a small embodied being?
It's a small embodied being, but even that small embodied being is happier when her heart is open.
Yes. Actually, the happiness shines from beyond that one's smallness. The happiness shines for itself. And it shines in your experience directly proportionate to the dissolution of the limitations of that individual being. If the individuality, which is the primal limitation, is relinquished, how vast is that love? It is no longer a means of relating as between one entity and another. It is, as was just mentioned, the indivisibility of being, the unfractured oneness of the infinite consciousness.
Could more selfless action help to diminish that ego if inquiry seems to be not accomplished?
Selfless service, selfless action of any kind, Sri Bhagavan has said, helps to purify the mind. Shankara said the same thing. It keeps off the gross forms of egotism and tends to make the mind much more sensitive to introspection because of the emphasis of something greater than the scope of the ego. Because of the turning back, as it were, of the tendency to demand that something or someone else give you happiness. You're looking more at that point to give than to receive. So it's a far more blessed state. But don't rule out the possibility of inquiry. These are not incompatible with each other.